Before we get into today's episode, I want to ask you a quick favour. If you're getting value from any of our podcasts, and I genuinely hope you are, could you take just 30 seconds right now and leave us a rating on Apple Podcasts or Spotify? It sounds like a small thing, but a rating would make a huge difference, and it'll take less time than pouring a cup of coffee. G'day. Welcome to the AgriCoach podcast for families on the land who want to grow their family's wealth and prosperity across the generations. I'm your host, Ben Law, and I'm the financial bloke. If you're a young man or woman in ag, maybe you've grown up on a property, maybe you're working your way back into the industry, or maybe you've got ambitions that feel bigger than your current surroundings, then this episode is going to be for you. Because today I'm sitting down with someone who started exactly where you might be standing right now. A kid from the bush, property out west, a father who believed hard work was the only answer and a formal education was mostly a waste of time. From those beginnings, Tim McGavin has built one of the most remarkable careers in Australian ag. He's the founder and managing director of Laguna Bay, one of the top 15 agricultural investment funds in the world, with close to $1 billion of assets under management spanning almonds, dairy, beef and cropping operations across Australia. He's been active in food and agriculture for the past 35 years and an agricultural investor for more than 20. But what makes Tim genuinely unusual is he didn't take a straight line to get there. There were vineyards and olive groves and renewable energy and commodity trading and a stint on the floor of the Chicago Mercantile Exchange and more than a few expensive lessons along the way. And through all of it, Tim has developed a set of frameworks and philosophies about how ambitious young people in agriculture should think about building their lives and their careers. Wisdom that most farming families never get exposed to, because nobody in their world has been where Tim has been. So today I want to hand the floor to Tim and ask him a simple question. If he was your mentor, if you had access to everything he's learned across 35 years of building, investing, failing and succeeding in ag, what would he tell you to do with your life? So without further delay, Tim, it's great to have you on the podcast, mate.
Oh, thanks, Ben. Great to be here and really appreciate what you're doing for agriculture and particularly succession. And I'm halfway through listening to Footy's podcast, so he might have one-upped me here. So you get the second best one in the last fortnight.
No, mate. We'll just tell him it's a competition. That's what we like to do. Now, Tim, before we get into your journey, because it's a really cool story, I have to say, and I want to just start somewhere personal first, just to sort of open things up. And when we chatted a couple of weeks ago, you said that your dad or your father was a really big figure in your life and had an influence. You know, he was a tough bushman, he was old school, he was a disciplinarian, and he didn't have much time for formal education, but kind of had this iron belief in hard work and living within your means. Now, do you mind just unpacking and telling us a little bit about him, but more importantly, how did he shape you into the man you are today?
Yeah, that's a good one. And absolutely, Dad had a huge impact. And I lost my mother when I was 7, so I didn't really know her. So no offence to her in any way in not acknowledging the impact. But Dad was born and raised at Barcaldine in Western Queensland on a property called the Patrick. He went and worked for Natco. He only had 6 years of education, so he really could hardly read and write, to the point where I remember our old calculator, he had a felt pen that had add and minus beside the plus and whatever mark. Yeah. And I remember when Mum died and he was trying to read us books and he'd be struggling on a word, and my sister, who was 4 years older, Sue, she would pick him up on a word. So it was amazing the man he was and where he got to with such limited education. But my mother drew our family farm in the 50s, one of those ballot blocks. She drew a third of it with her siblings, and then Mum and Dad bought the rest out after they got married. But Dad was very, very street smart, very, very, as you say, hard-working, firm but fair, very honest, but call a spade a shovel. Mm-hmm. And yeah, as I mentioned, he lost his wife. Mum was 39 and he had 3 little kids in the middle of the outback.
Wow.
Pretty simple existence out there. We were off-grid, so T2 volt, wind-generated power, backup batteries, an old hand-crank YB if the lights got dim, and kerosene fridges and the like, no air conditioners or fans or whatever. So I think to a certain extent, Dad just worked to kill the pain. Obviously, there was a lot of pain under there, and that was his way of coping. And, you know, a lot of people would have turned to addictions or whatnot, and thank God for us that he turned it to work. And I guess there was a lot of early mornings, mustering before school and whatnot, or all holidays where we probably were cursing having such a hard-working dad. But look, Dad was a very tough man, very tough mentally, and I think that's something that you hear the word resilience all the time. I'm not sure what it means, but Dad was diagnosed with cancer when he was 59, given 2 years to live. And he sort of willed his longevity. He was in denial, which was great mental strategy. He wouldn't let himself acknowledge that he actually had cancer. And, I've seen him a syringe in his pocket to sort of kill the pain, and he'd be out there still on a horse drafting sheep, and lots of funny stories. But, just strong value system, just taught us about taking responsibility, and outcomes come from effort and discipline and not talk. He always used to say, everyone else will be in the pub talking about what they're going to get done, and we'll have it done by then.
Yeah, doers.
Yeah. So I think thrift, which is an old-fashioned word, but living within your means.
Yeah, the politicians could learn a bit from that, couldn't they?
Oh, yeah, shocking, absolutely, and worrying how unthrifty we are as a nation and even individuals. But I think gratitude and just never seeing yourself as a victim, and, that responsibility model, and not complaining. Dad loved Australia, which I think was another great lesson. And it's really worrying for me. We got this underlying sort of curse, if you like, of people now feeling guilty for being Australians and not loving our flag and our country. And I think that brings great risk to our country and to great shame. But really, Dad was an ultimate contrarian. He'd be middle of a drought, no rain on the horizon. He'd be up north buying big mobs of really cheap old cows and bring them back and, throw a good bull over them, and sure enough, it'd rain, and you need to sell them well. So, a lot of the way that I think today, about discipline, responsibility, and backing yourself.
Risk-taking.
Risk-taking comes straight from the old man.
Yeah, it's interesting. And also your sister, I believe, was fairly influential on you as well, Sue.
Yeah, Sue was amazing. She basically became our mother when Mum died, and has always had our back. And, God help anyone who crossed my brother Rob or I. But she would do all the cooking on the old wood stove at the age of 11 onwards, and even, the old washing machine had the old ringer. So it's an incredible person. Wouldn't be here without her.
Yeah, it's amazing, isn't it?
As is Rob, my brother. And, we're very, very close, had siblings. Very lucky. I feel like I won the birth lotto.
Yeah, that's good. And it's interesting. Quite often you'll find behind people that succeed or have this drive to succeed, shall we say, is there's some real pain and hurt and difficult times in their youth. And it's amazing. I try and tell anyone that's going through a difficult time, you will look at this if you look at it through the right lens, and 20, 30 years from now is going, wow, I'm so glad I got to experience that, because I know I look back at the painful things that happened to me and go, I wouldn't be where I am today without those.
It's so true. And I think it's harder nowadays when you've got constant connectivity and social media, and every day, if you look at something, you'll think the world's going to end, or you feel like a loser because someone's having a whale of a time. And so I think it's harder now. We were sort of, ignorance was bliss when we were younger. Out of that news cycle, you didn't know what everyone else was doing. You didn't know what you were missing out on. So, I think it's harder for young people nowadays, but I think it's all the more important that, we learn from those that went before us, and hopefully we get the chance to talk about Marcus Mines later on, but it's certainly one of the drivers for that.
Tim, you've got a really solid foundation from that. You've shared that about your dad, your family, your brother, your sister, etc. And you've sort of went from that real basic foundation to building something, pretty amazing. I just want you to take us through it. From a kid from the bush, how did you end up getting to the point of running the agricultural fund, which is one of the top ones in the world?
It was never a grand plan. It was a lot of timing and luck, I suppose. And I guess my quick yarn, if you like, was I was lucky enough to be sent to boarding school from Western Queensland from grade 9 to grade 12, which really helped sort of shape your contact base and looking over at what you might aspire towards. And went up north when I left school, worked in a stock camp for a while, came back to Western Queensland, had an aerial mustering business, started contracting just on a motorbike with a dog and whatever, and realised that I was too lazy to do that. And I could earn more money if I bought a little ultralight and do a few hours flying, and earn more in a few hours than I'd earn in a week doing the latter. And I could also base myself at home and help Dad. Some tough times during the 90s, so it was beneficial, I guess, for the family business to have someone based there doing the work and obviously not getting paid. Put myself through Marcus Oldham at 24. And again, lessons there. I would not change anything there in terms of having a few gap years before you work out if you study something, unless you know what you want to do deep within your heart. Went to Marcus, and my brother and I, the old man let us use collateral in his farm to buy a little vineyard, and got a bit lucky with the timing, I guess, there as well, into the boom of the 90s, and grew that into a pretty big enterprise with long-term contracts, and sold out of that and went and did my MBA at Sydney at the age of 30. had some money in my pocket, didn't know what I was going to do, and then just decided I wanted to get into sort of agriculture but do it differently, leverage a skill set. And I didn't really want to be out living hands-on day in, day out in the middle of nowhere. And as I mentioned before, the 90s were very painful. The droughts and the wool floor price crash, and very, very tough. Saw a lot of people go broke, a lot of people commit suicide. And I shot a hell of a lot of sheep. There was government-sponsored sheep shootings out there. You'd get paid $2 for an old cast for age ewe, and you'd get paid $6 for a weaner to shoot them. There was no market. So given I was aerial mustering at the time, I'd land and get given the gun. So I shot a lot. And I just realised if I didn't get out of there, I'd probably end up shooting myself. So that was a great motivator. So again, no grand plan, just running away from the pain, I suppose. And then Laguna Bay sort of came about probably 15 years ago, just looking at agriculture with a friend and wondering how you could sort of get exposure. We'd studied a lot of economics and sort of history and finance when I was doing my masters, and read about the BRICS, Brazil, Russia, India, China back then, and went and visited most of those countries and just thought, right, how do we play this thematic over the coming decades? And thought they'll want food and they'll want commodities and whatnot. So at the time, there wasn't a lot of vegetable agricultural product, and still feel pretty strongly that it's a great asset class for institutional portfolios as a diversifier, as an inflation hedge. And also there's a lot of equity that's needed for the bush, a lot of expansion and succession capital, equity capital that's needed over the coming decade or so, particularly as the average age of the farmer is 60 and the average farm will probably change hands, and a lot of those businesses don't have the debt service capacity to extend their facilities. So it's either sell something, restructure something, or get a funding partner. So really the business was set up to try and joint venture with the next generation and provide funding for them. In parallel to Laguna, back then, I also seeded a landfill gas services business, which goes in and negotiates the rights over the methane of landfills, which is the smell you can smell when you drive past a landfill. Again, that's with a mate, has sort of grown into now a listed company, but we have about 30 landfills down the east coast and 9 power stations. And so that's also been a great lucky journey, and it's, solving other people's problems and doing business with really good people is key. So timing and luck, probably a cross between Stephen Bradbury and Forrest Gump, something like that. Just bumbled along, fell into a few things, been lucky. I've made some mistakes along the way too, which I'm very happy to talk about.
It's interesting, just if I can put my little 2 cents worth in here, Tim, is someone said to me once, like I was complaining, those people are lucky. This was many, many years ago. They said, those people are lucky. I'm not going to be lucky like that. That's one of these rare things. And they said to me, Ben, do you know how you get more lucky? I said, no, how do you get more lucky? And they said, think you're lucky.
Yeah.
And that was a real eye-opener for me in life, was if you go through life thinking, right, I'm lucky, I can take this risk, I'll give it a go. Honestly, things don't even go always right. But when they don't go right, it's like, well, I'm pretty lucky. I'm sure this is going to work out, and keep pushing forward. Have you found that sort of permeated who you are? Because you sound like the sort of guy that would just keep rolling even when the punches come through.
Oh, categorically. And I guess that's one of the lessons you learn from having a father figure like we did. And I'm a big believer in that. If you think you're unlucky, you will be. And if you think you're lucky, you will be. And everyone gets what they really want in the end, I think. When I say that, I mean that in a really loving way, in terms of deep down, some people, it's not healthy. But if you've got a victim mentality and, you suffer from envy and wake up every day ungrateful for your lot, it's not going to help you at all. So these are really easy things to change. And so I think most certainly, and learning how to thrive through those adverse times if you can. And as you said before, like everything passes. The good times pass, the bad times pass. And, the great tragedy when you read about the high suicide rates in the bush, it's just, you just know that for that person, could have been very close to the bottom, and God knows how happy and successful and contented they probably would have been if they hadn't chosen that path and just toughed it out. And I think the other thing is not for happiness and contentedness is just not benchmarking yourself against anyone else, but benchmark yourself against yourself a few years ago and try and avoid the obvious psychological mistakes of some of those things that'll sort of do you in. I think someone said that envy's the only 7 deadly sin that you can't have any fun with, so I'd recommend avoiding that.
Yeah. It's also interesting. I still suffer that from myself, Tim, like personally. It's one of those things that I always struggle with is, and I think this goes for people that are driven. Maybe 12 months ago, I remember I was sitting down and I was sort of analysing where I was at and reflecting, and I was really frustrated in that moment that I just hadn't got to where I wanted to be. And I was like, I just haven't got there. And then serendipitously, I was cleaning out my computer a day or so later, and I actually found I'd written essentially not goals, but a bit of a story about where I'd be in 2025. And I went back and looked at it and I went, holy shit, like I'm well past that. I've ticked off all those. And what I actually realised is I was benchmarking myself consistently against this ever-moving target. Yeah. And I think that's just as bad for some young people, is to always think I need to be further ahead than I am. Now, sometimes that can be fuel in the fire, but sometimes it can be a little bit toxic. So for you, when you were hitting those tough times, because like you said, nothing went perfectly all the time, did you naturally fall into the rhythm of just, yep, it'll be right, we'll just push our way through? Or did you have to sort of pick yourself up by your bootlaces and keep pushing forward?
Yeah, you have to pick yourself up by the bootlaces. I don't think anyone is immune from suffering from pain, and sometimes failing is the opportunity to learn to try again a bit more intelligently. There's always lessons in things, and just understanding that you've got such an advantage living in Australia, being born in Australia, and just the land of opportunity, and it's safe, and there's no one here who has to live on the street. We've got the best sort of social security nets, safety nets that you can get, and don't take away. I feel incredibly lucky how it's happened. Life's panned out. It's not over yet. But I think the number one thing is just comparing yourself with someone else. Yes. There's a lot of miserable rich people that are looking over the fence.
Yeah, a lot of depressed billionaires.
Yeah, exactly. Watch your fishing rod tip, not someone else's rod tip.
It's interesting, Tim. I see that. People always say to me, when I get to here. So they think that when you've hit in inverted commas, people can't see this, but inverted commas, I'm successful, that all your problems are going to disappear and life's going to be great and there's going to be rainbows and unicorns and party music all the time. But what they don't realise is they're just trading low-value problems, high-value problems. And a great example I give people, a really, really simple one, is I have no money versus I have to pay the tax department all this tax. And when you get to the point in your life where you are paying lots of tax and you're grizzling about it, that's a problem. Yeah. How am I going to fund that? Where's it going to come from? Oh, my God, I've worked all this hard. I've got to give the tax department all this money. So you're not actually, as you go through life, it's not going to get any easier. It's just trading different problems. And in my eyes, the goal in life is to trade low-value problems for high-value problems.
You're dead right with people just perpetually waiting to be happy. I guess you're very young, you want to be something else. You're looking at whatever, I won't be happy till I leave school, or I won't be happy till I leave university, and then I won't be happy till I get my first job or a better job, and I won't be happy till I get married, and I won't be happy till I get a house, and I won't be happy till I have kids. And, people wake up and they're 60 and they're still not happy. And, as you said, you're either happy or you're not. And it's mental strategy. Everything's learned. You can learn to be miserable. You can learn to be happy. It's a choice. You look at some of the poorest countries in the world and just the happiest people. They've got meaning and purpose in their life, and whatever that means to them. And food on the table is a great day.
Yeah, and a lot of people out there, like if you think about it practically, whatever your problem is, however bad it is, there's a lot of people around the world that would swap your problems for theirs in a heartbeat. Yeah. And when you stop and think about that, when you're in the middle of that, is like someone would swap me and they just say, this is an awesome problem to have. So yeah, it's all about the mindset, the way you look at it. So Tim, we're here. One of the things that I'm really passionate about, and this is how you and I connected, we're both really passionate about the next generation. I've got a daughter coming through, you've got a son coming through, the next generation, and we're really passionate about agriculture and bringing the next generation through. So one of the things I just want to touch on is you've gone through a really unique story. You didn't know where you were going. There was a lot of, dry creek beds you went up. But if I want to talk directly to the young people out there, how important is it for especially ambitious young people in ag to get out there and get some really broad experience in their 20s before they settle back into the family business or their own operation? And if they do get out and do that, what the hell should they be doing with that time to really make it valuable?
Great question. And I think probably a message to us old people as well. It's a pretty unfair question to ask someone who's young, or if they're about to leave school, or even if they're, whatever age, as to what are you going to do? I think you can sort of reframe it, say, what do you love at school, and what do you like and what do you don't like? Because in reality, most kids won't know what they want to do, and most adults don't know what they want to do. And I'm not sure I know what I want to do when I grow up. But I think having a gap year or a multiple gap years, and I don't say gap year in terms of, not working, it's just getting as many different experiences across as many different sectors as you possibly can and as many different geographies as you can, and just being a perpetual student, if you like, of just learning, reading. Don't waste your time, doom scrolling, pick up a book, pick up a biography or listen to your podcast or whatever. Just constantly learn. And I think either study something that's going to give you universal skills so it doesn't really matter where you end up, or study something that you know in your heart that's actually what you want to do. We have an education bubble globally in the West where people have this belief that you've got to leave school and go to university. So I'd argue that the majority of people study something they probably don't use much. And that's fine. Maybe it's a great experience to go to college and just learn how to learn and have fun and whatever. But I think it's a better use of time to get out there and have a gap year and travel. And whether it's travelling around Australia, whether it's travelling internationally, it doesn't really matter. It's cheap to travel internationally. And I guess trying to work out, if you don't know what you want to do, which you probably don't, just try and work out what you don't want, what sort of life you don't want, what sort of partner, friends, job you don't want. Even a financial freedom index of realistically of what you don't want as well. And then at least I think that's inverting that problem. It makes more sense in my mind than trying to sort of really go for perfection, trying to avoid mistakes. And for their agricultural people, I think it's really, really important to get out there and work for other peoples and don't go home unless there's been a conversation of some sorts about succession. It may not be rock solid, but it's an understanding. You do not want to go home and wake up when you're 40 and the farm's sold and you don't have a lot of experiences, you have limited employment options. And so, I'd say be patient and you got plenty of time and just wait for the fat pitches and asymmetrical payoffs where you can leverage your skill set and things will work out. And if you've got a positive attitude and you just believe that things will work out, then they normally will, I think.
What about the importance of who you're surrounded by, Tim? Is that as important as people say it is?
I think it's even more important than what people say it is. And it starts with your friend group and it starts with you can't control your family. I was lucky in that regard, but I'd say don't ever work for someone that you don't aspire to be like. Everyone talks about mentors. I've had a lot of mentors in my life that I've never met. I might have listened to, read their books initially before podcasts, but then you'll get nuggets of wisdom from random sources of people that'll guide you for the rest of your life, and just keep it really simple. Don't make it complex.
It's all about curiosity.
Yes, exactly. And just, you've got an obligation to yourself and your future self particularly to just never stop learning. You leave school, it's a license to start learning. You go to university, you leave, it's a license to start learning. You get your first job, everything's a license to learn. And I think I got that from an old pilot when I did my pilot's license, who said to me, okay, you got your pilot's license, you've now got a license to start learning, and how true that was and is.
It's interesting, Tim. I hated school. I had no love for school at all. I went to university. I didn't really have great love for university other than the partying and the fun that I never told my mum about. But the thing is what I actually figured out, and this was probably the number one thing I wish I'd learnt when I was a lot younger, was the fact that learning isn't just university or courses or school. It's learning in life. It's like you mentioned, books, podcasts, courses, learning from mentors, learning from mistakes. And I'm actually a voracious learner now. Like, I love learning. I'm always trying to find new things. I love talking to people like this to understand things. And it's actually interesting. And I think there's a lot more kids, and I say kids in inverted commas, but young adults in agriculture that haven't gone the traditional path, that aren't necessarily consider them to be academic, that are actually out there learning more than the ones that have just settled into university, gone out, got a job, and then stopped learning.
Yeah, good point. So true.
Yeah,
we're lucky now you can tap into anyone, anywhere in the world, really, and get AI to summarise the big basic things and learn really efficiently and really quickly. And I tell you what, it's a lot easier to learn from other people's mistakes than to learn from your own.
Hell yeah, and less painful too. So, Tim, like if you think about, say, a 22 to 25-year-old young man or woman, and they're going out there saying, well, that's all great. I understand that. That's good. Maybe university's not for me. Maybe it is. But if you had to design a quasi degree, shall we call it, what's on the list, or what skills do you think they actually need to be building over their 20s?
And I so wish that this question would be asked and answered from practical people to our educational institutions, because I think number one, just multidisciplinary learning. So try and learn the big, basic, obvious concepts across multiple disciplines, across the spectrum, which is why your MBAs and those sorts of things, Marcus Oldham is good at this, where they'll have a cross-section of things, and not only just learning those, but then wrapping those up into a case study mindset of just bringing everything together. And, when you've got to make decisions, outcomes are based on systems, not individual parts. So you need to learn how to use every part of your brain and absolutely avoid ideologies, avoid group think. Unfortunately, universities at the moment predominantly left-leaning and being indoctrinated with a lot of stuff that I don't necessarily believe in. I think it's morally corrupt to be instilling political views and social views onto our students. But you see a lot of that, unfortunately, so don't fall into that group think, monkey see, monkey do mentality. Think for yourself. Don't let anyone tell you how you should be thinking. But unfortunately, whether you like it or not, you've got to distill really complex things down into simplicity. So it's really rare for people that can actually bring that understanding that everything has second and third order consequences and understanding incentives. So I'd imagine psychology would be up there probably as number one. I guess the soft sciences, if you like. And it starts with yourself, understanding who you are, understanding what type of personality you are, understanding your strengths, your weaknesses, your natural competitive advantage, whether you're high IQ, low IQ, it doesn't matter. It's just self-awareness, I think, is very, very important. And just drinking in feedback, asking for feedback. Don't develop a thin skin where you think that if someone's giving you feedback, I think in all our businesses, we use what we call radical candor, where it's the most loving thing you can do to your friends, to your business colleagues, is give just genuine, positive, well-delivered, unemotional feedback. And I love that. I love getting it. I love it when someone tells me I'm useless at something, because it means that I can get out of the way and I can free up some time and get someone more intelligent in there to do what I thought I was good at. And I think understanding, as part of that, just your communication, how to communicate with people. AI is going to replace a lot of jobs, but it's not going to replace emotional intelligence. And so if you can, A, learn yourself, B, learn how to communicate, just learn how to listen, really listen deeply to people, and you'll learn a lot. You'll be more personable. Obviously, financial literacy goes without saying. Such a shame that you don't get more of that in schools. It should be compulsory to do maths, should be compulsory to do economics. Regardless of whether you like it or not, I think it's a mistake that schools in particular have an economics class. They should probably have, various levels so that everyone has to do it, but there's various levels. Obviously, your very highly academic students are probably going to be at a different level, which is fine. And like you, I struggled a bit at school. I certainly wasn't academic. I think understanding how you learn, I didn't know that, to be honest, until I was 30 and I went and did my MBA. I didn't know that at school. I didn't know that at Marcus Oldham. I'm a writer. If I don't write something down, it just goes straight through my brain. Some people are a listener. Some people are a reader. And it's not only important that you learn yourself, it's very important you learn your teams, how they learn as well. Because no use if your boss learns one way, whether it's listening or reading or writing, no use you giving him a big report if he learns by listening. He won't read it. I think there's a lot in that. And, we've spoken about just self-awareness. I know we'll talk about that hopefully later. I think just the big basic understandings of elementary level, just sciences and engineering and just how the world actually works, particularly, some engineering disciplines around just particularly with investing, building a margin of safety on everything you do over engineering. What's the things it'll do you in? And I think very simple concepts you can take away from those disciplines. And just the humanities, which, history particularly, and learning from history and learning about mistakes that those who went before us made, the ones you might want to avoid. And it's particularly relevant now for where Australia is, I think, for people to bring all this together in terms of understanding basic economics, understanding psychology, and understanding what you touched on before, just what happens to a country when you live beyond your means for too long. It goes along very well for a while and then it doesn't. And so if we don't rein it in soon, at some stage, I think, unfortunately, in our lifetime, this inflation will be permanent and it'll just get worse and worse. So if you own assets, you'll be fine. And if you don't, you're going to get squeezed. So, I'd really encourage people to think about how they can leverage their skill set in whatever way they can to try and get some equity ownership in businesses. And that's going to mean short-term sacrifices. I mean, what we look for is people who really want to work with us, for us, whatever, and people that think through their equity, partners that think They're not worried too much about their salary today, and you can get good upside, or you should be able to negotiate that if you get yourself into a position where your skills are really valued and you're really valued. And I think there's a lot of people around, but there's not probably a lot of brilliant people. So turn yourself into brilliant, whatever that means, again, by avoiding the big, basic, obvious mistakes that tend to be made, I suppose, by all of us. There's a lot in that.
There is. I've got lots of notes, mate. Don't worry. So it's interesting. I had this exact conversation with John Anderson, ex-Deputy Prime Minister, last year on the podcast.
I love John Anderson's podcast.
And we talked about the intergenerational theft and what's going on from a history point of view. And I think that's really important, because if you understand history, you understand context of what's happening around you. And as they say, history never repeats itself, but it generally rhymes. So there's going to be some commonalities between there. So, Tim, you're actively involved in Marcus Hold'em, and you're involved with Marcus Mines. So hopefully this will tie in each other. But you mentioned before self-awareness. Now, for the young person out there that's thinking, what's this self-awareness hippie talk? Talk us through what, in your mind, self-awareness is. And by the way, I'm on your side. I get it. I know what it means, and I agree. But what does that look like, and what does it mean? And then tie us into Marcus Mines and how you've been involved in that.
Yeah, okay. So firstly, self-awareness is really understanding yourself, having the ability to sit back and observe your thinking, if you like. Who is that little thinker that does your thinking for them when you find yourself talking to yourself? Who is that? And I always say I only talk to myself when I want expert advice, but it's understanding, how you think, how you learn, how you react, what triggers you, recognising, your biases and your blind spots, and, your mindset will drive your performance and your outcomes. So it's a lot of things, but it starts with just understanding the basics of psychology, a little bit of biology in there, but it's sort of observing yourself. And you can tell a self-aware person they can have a joke on themselves, they're less thin-skinned, better to be around, to be frank. So Marcus Mines, Marcus Hold'em had a huge impact on myself, and if you ask my brother Rob, he'll tell you the same thing, and he's actually chairman of it now, so he's dedicating a lot of time as a lot of great people. Marcus is a private agricultural college and one of the last probably great independent institutions. Being private, they run it like a business. You can get a degree there in 2 years. Very much as I said, a multidisciplinary, case study driven, lots of good guest speakers, go out there and do a case study on an actual business or farm or whatnot. Everyone gets rated and ranked, including the lecturers, and, they're not heavily unionised, and they're not driving that sort of woke agenda down people's throats. They just really value, freedom of expression and freedom of speech and those things that are really, really fundamental.
And being challenged.
Yep. Marcus has had a few high-profile cases of suicide, unfortunately, and they had a course for the students called Mental Health and Resilience, and I was talking to the executive there, and they were sort of saying how it doesn't get much take-up, no one goes to it, and yet everyone needs it, and people probably even want it. But I said, and they asked if I would sort of think about how to change the stigma, if you like, of that, and that led probably to a collaborative between Marcus Hold'em and myself, for Laguna Bay, if you like, into sort of I guess you'd call it a high-performance centre, but it's an online free resource. It's available to everybody. Really what it is, it's a summary of nuggets of worldly wisdom from those who went before us, from some of the leading experts in high performance in the world. Our project manager is Chris Hink. He's a professor at Deakin, but he was a high-performance coach with the Institute of Sport, the Geelong Cats during their reign of premierships originally, Adelaide Crows and the Australian Olympic basketball team and whatnot. Luke Bennett, another great Aussie, ex-RFDS doctor, who ended up becoming the team doctor for Formula One and ran the Hinter High Performance Centre, which is a very expensive European high performance centre. He's worked with at least half a dozen world champions in Formula One, high net worths, big family offices and businesses around the world. And now he works for Peter Attia, who's probably the world's preeminent longevity coach, and lives in Austin. But I guess I live on the Sunshine Coast. It's not a random postcard. I've been very lucky to meet a lot of just incredibly successful people, athletes, and obviously Formula One driver as well. Mark Webber is a neighbour. And listening to a lot of these people, you'd think high performance, it must be amazing. They must have all these resources and budgets and everything, which they do. But when you distill it down to the basics, it's available to all of us and it's actually free. So some of these centres charge sort of $250,000 a year, just have access to them. So at its core, it's about high performance. So it's about just making better decisions. Just prepare yourself for clarity of thinking and understanding, avoiding those common psychological traps we spoke about. It's about just your decisions will make up, the sum of your decisions will dictate the outcome of your whole life. We touched on self-awareness and obviously the discipline to make those decisions. Productivity, what does that mean? It's not about doing more, it's about doing what matters and doing it consistently. It's about positivity, which is a multiplier. We spoke about that, but your mindset drives your performance. And you can feel that, your energy levels are contagious, whether they're positive or negative. If you're in a bad mood or you've got a negative mindset, the first thing you try and do is pass that on to someone else. And you can feel that.
It's more infectious.
Yeah, it is. It's absolutely contagious. And the right environment will lift your output if you put it in there, and the wrong one will drain it. So I think some people are just a walking, talking shit magnet, and that's what they attract in life. So stay away from those sort of energy thieves, if you like, and just habits, actions repeated over time, little ones, simple ones, shape your behaviour, and that determines your outcomes. So the good habits will reduce the frictions in your life and build momentum, and that compounds over time. Little things compound. We're talking the basics of your exercise, your diet, your sleep, everything that's really simple. You already know it really intuitively. It's just you may not have had the awareness or exposure to the people in the world who you might trust to validate some of this stuff. Bad habits are really easy to form, pretty hard to break, and they erode your performance, compound negatively over time. Time management, I think, is a really, really big one, and something that's not really taught, but it's your most valuable and your most limited resource. We've all got the same amount of time. Everyone talks about Elon Musk, it's incredible, the Einstein of our time, but he's got the same amount of hours in every day that we do.
Yeah, well, I have to correct you on that, though. The whingers don't have the same amount of time.
No, 100%. Be very wary of someone who runs around and tells you how busy they are and how well things are going. But how you use your time will determine your outcomes. So focus on what matters and just say no to just low value activities and allocate that time. I have done for probably 20 years of just once a year. I have a spreadsheet and it's available on Marcus Mind's website, but do a 15-minute diary for a week or two of just everything you're doing, and it'll pretty quickly highlight what you're doing, what's wasting your time, who's wasting your time, and actually where you're not getting enough of your time, whether it's yourself, some sort of hobby, looking after yourself, exercise, or your family not getting the right amount of time, or some people within your business. And unfortunately, the 20% of problems use up 80% of your time. So it's a good annual self-reflection on how to optimise that time and learn how to say no to people and spend your time where it's most valuable. You want to be effective more than busy. Marcus is really saying that your outcomes are not random. They're driven by how you think, how you decide, and how you behave just consistently over time. And just don't underestimate the compounding, whether you're investing or whether you're just in life. And if you think about if you doom scroll for just 30 or 40 minutes a day, it mightn't seem like much, but then compound that over your life versus doing that into something productive. And there'll be a light years gap between the person that doom scrolls for 45 minutes and the person that picks up a book and reads or invests in however you like to learn, again, whether it's podcasts or whatever, it doesn't matter.
For those who are listening and going, and this is the thing I find turns people off because I talk about high performance is, well, I'm not a high performer. I feel like there's a disconnect. Like this is only for people that are elite levels, and that's easy for Tim to say. He's obviously a high performer. Yeah. Can you just dispel that myth for me, mate? Because you'll probably do it much better than me. If it's high performance work, is it really just for high performers?
No, absolutely not. And you're right. I struggle with that word, which is why we're going to call it the Marcus High Performance Centre, and we can that, and I probably shouldn't even use that word high performance.
Just to be clear, I love high performance because I think that's what we're aspiring to, but not everyone thinks like that.
No, you're right. And it doesn't matter. And again, getting back to the individual, high performance in, again, don't compare yourself with anyone else. It might be high performance in if you're unlucky enough to have an injury, or high performance for you might be what's everything I can do to get myself back on track for that particular project. It might be short term, might be working towards a goal, but again, it's available for everyone. It's free. It's not a magic sauce. It's all very, very simple, and you read it and you go, there's nothing really new in there. I sort of knew all that, but then it's the discipline to actually do it. And you don't want to be a monk, and you don't want to have to change your life too much, but you can tweak it a little bit and get great benefits. And I think particularly during those tough times when it's really easy to go, I'll just kill the pain with a six-pack, a better decision with better outcomes that'll help dig you out of the hole will be look after yourself, go and do some exercise or whatever floats your boat.
Perfect. Where can they find details on Marcus Mines for anyone who goes, oh, that might be something I'm interested in?
Yeah, just on the Marcus Oldham website, there's a link there to Marcus Mines. And yeah, it's not perfect, it's not everything, but it only has to change one life and it's done its job.
Well, and sometimes it's progress, not perfection. So if there's anyone out there that's listening going, geez, I'm a little bit lost, I don't know where I'm going, I'm struggling, or I haven't got clarity, hey, you've got no excuses now. Why don't you go check it out, have a bit of a look, learn something. And if you take away one thing at the end of it, it could be that one compounding thing that changes your life. And I know there's been many of those sliding doors moments in my life. I look at where I am now and there's just been these little things that I've learnt that all of a sudden have been a light bulb in my head and just changed the whole trajectory of my life for the better. So, yeah, if it's being curated by great people, why wouldn't you go along? And like you said, $250,000 a year to get access to some of this stuff with high-performance centres overseas. Why wouldn't you go along and check it out?
Yeah, and you'll be surprised just how simple it all is. We sort of did it so for busy people. Everyone's busy, limited time. So we've tried to distill a lot of content into really simple one pages that you can go in there for an hour and probably cover the whole lot, or you could dig deep and go into resources. And to be honest, you could do a PhD on any of those things, spend your whole life there, and people do. But, it's a great opportunity to learn from others without having to learn that the hard way. And I'd encourage people just to have a flick through, and it may not be for you at the moment, but sometime when you hit a rough patch or you have trouble sleeping or whatever it is, you might go, remember that and delve in. And again, it's just a really simple, free thing. And if you don't like it, that's totally understandable.
Yeah.
You might find something better. You probably definitely will find something better. But we've tried to sort of myth bust and get credible sources.
That's good. And look, to let everyone know, I remember when I was 32, I remember cleaning out my cupboard at home when I was moving, and I found this book called Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill, a really old classic. And I got it out and I'm like, where the bloody hell's this come from? And I started reading it. I'm like, this is gold. And then all of a sudden it dawned on me, and I opened the front cover and there was a message from a guy I used to work with who was probably my age now and wrote, Ben, this is a great book, read it and digest it. And I must have read it when I was 22 and gone, what's this bullshit? And threw it in the back of the cupboard. This is rubbish. What am I going on? Then I picked it up at 32 and I'm like, oh my God, why haven't I read this before? So sometimes it's about the right time in your life. So expose yourself to it now. If it doesn't resonate, that's fine. Maybe in 6 months, maybe in 2 years it will. Maybe it'll hit you right between the eyes, but start the process. So Tim, if you could talk directly to those next generation young men and women that are out there that are ambitious and driven and really solid values, what's one thing you'd want to leave them with that you want them to take away from today?
Probably the simple chain that I believe in and that is stolen from someone else, but that is that, your thoughts will drive your decisions, and your decisions will drive your actions, and your actions become your habits, and your habits form your character, and your character determines where you end up. So, I would just say keep it simple. Avoid the stupidity rather than chase brilliance or perfectionism.
Yeah, really good advice, Tim. A lot of gold nuggets in there. That's been intensely interesting. I love all the stories you've got there, and I think any young person who's listening will get some great value. So I just want to say you're a busy man, and I really appreciate your time coming on. And I know from the next generation, there's a wealth of knowledge that we can all drag out of to get better in life. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Ben. And I feel a bit guilty we didn't touch on the many mistakes I've made, which is probably more lessons in them, but maybe that's one for some other time.
I think that's a great one for another time. So therefore, everyone's heard me. I've got witnesses. Tim said he's going to come and do this again, and we'll talk about stuff-ups, and we can talk about mine and we can talk about yours.
Only if I get more listeners than David Foote gets. There you go.
Done. There's your competition. So everyone out there, make sure you share this podcast far and wide as far as you can. We want to get the inter-office rivalry going.
It is the McGavin versus Foote.
Sounds good. Awesome. Righto, Tim. Well, thanks very much for your time. I've really appreciated it.
Okay. Thanks, Ben. Take care.
Righto. Well, there was a lot of information in that podcast. Tim did a great job. What I'm going to do is, if you can just give me a couple of minutes, I'm just going to run through what he said as a bit of a summary for you all, what he said he'd learn. Number one, self-awareness. Learn about yourself, how you think, how you learn, how you communicate, and your behavioural style. Number two, drink in feedback. Get a thick skin and always want to get what he called radical candour. Number three, communicate. Learn how to communicate better, but more importantly, learn how to listen deeply. Number four, financial literacy. learn numbers. If you can't learn numbers, you're not going to be successful in business. Number 5 was work out how you learn. Is it auditory, like through listening? Is it through writing? Learn how you learn, then you can do more of it. Number 6 was learn how things work. So he talked about engineering and mechanical and get some practical understanding of how systems work, as he talked about as an engineer. So learn some of that stuff. Number 7, history. History doesn't repeat itself, but it definitely rhymes. And the last one was on how to get equity in a business. So how do you actually create equity and value in a business with the way the world is at the moment? So they were just the few things that he said he'd go out and learn. Now, for me, I just want to say, get over to that free resource. I checked it out. It's amazing. That's Marcus Minds. It's in the show notes, but just Google it. Nice and easy. And the last thing I want to leave you with before you go is make sure you don't become, as Tim said, a walking, talking shit magnet. Positivity is a multiplier. So if you can be optimistic and positive about whatever situation you're in, that's going to most likely get you out of that situation and create a much better outcome. Now, before we go, if you've got anyone that you think would benefit from the conversation with Tim, make sure you share it with them. Send the podcast across, give a recommendation, and make sure they actually have a listen, because I think there's some really valuable stuff in there, and any young person, whether you're 40 down to 20, will get some great value out of that. So that's it for today. I'm Ben Law, I'm the Financial Bloke, and remember, it's more important who you are than what you got. I'll see you next time.